Hello and welcome to Acceptable Madness. My name is Scott McKinney and this is the podcast for depressed people. Today I wanted to talk about friendship and friends and stuff like that. I won't touch on family too much. I mean, although I hope that some of these points are going to be synonymous, but I'll do a family episode in the future. But today the main focus is just going to be friends, friendship, and some of the difficulties that I've encountered and how I've been working to overcome them. The reason that I wanted to do this episode now is actually because I've been having those moments where you're just like sitting there doing something, whether it's watching TV or for me writing or playing a video game or doing something, and then out of nowhere you'll just have a thought hit you like a truck. And then it just takes all of your focus, and then you're just thinking about it. And they're usually negative thoughts, and I'll give some examples of them as I keep going. But they just take all your attention, and then you're kind of stuck there in this cycle of self-pity because you did something wrong, or you didn't do something that you maybe should have, or something like that. And just to give a little bit of an example for this, I'll give one now. There was one point where I was in college and I passed my friend who I won't name anybody, but basically myself, because although this is a pretty personal podcast for me, it's not personal for the people that I'm associated with. So, but I was walking past my friend and she was standing there talking to some of her other friends. And whenever I walked past her, she said hello, and it was very polite and it was very nice. And it was, a pretty good way to start a conversation. And I was in a rush, so I had to go back to my apartment. And I very simply just said the word. So she said hello, and then I followed up with a pretty crude statement, to say the least, where I very simply said, "Fuck you." Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but there are times where, at least for me, where you're in that moment where you really don't want to talk to anybody. And whether you like them or you don't like them, saying something like that is never an appropriate thing to say. But it still came out, and I didn't stop it. I didn't have any control over it. It just came out. And then as I'm walking back to my apartment, I'm just sitting there going, what is wrong with me? Why couldn't I just say hello like a normal person, you big dumb idiot? and I'm just sitting there like upset with myself because it's ridiculous. She was polite. She said hello. And then I followed it up with just this absurd, rude comment. And this happened a few years ago, and it's still one of those moments that just keeps coming back, and it just pops into my head, and I'll think about it, and I'll just be sitting there doing something, and then it's there, and then I'm immediately just in like self-pity and self-hate, because I'm just like, why couldn't I say something different, or be nicer, or again, be a normal person? And stuff like that. I mean, there are more examples, and I'll bring up more as this continues. Examples that are similar to that, and examples that aren't similar at all. But stuff like that just has been popping into my head a lot, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that recently I've been going through a lot of just changes in my personality. I think it has to do with all the writing in the podcast and everything like that, but kind of being more self-aware and understanding of the thoughts that go through my head has been helping me be a bit more empathetic, sympathetic, less socially awkward in a lot of cases. And I've been able to kind of acknowledge that these are places or these are things that I've done that are awkward or rude, and this is how I would have fixed them. Now, that's not to say that I've totally come to terms with all of the mistakes and dumb shit that I've said in the past, and I'm okay with it, but it is me becoming more self-aware. Another example of something like this is I have a friend who got a pretty terrible illness. He got Lyme disease, and he got it, I think, playing paintball, and a tick latched onto him. But what came with that is, I know Lyme disease, that's something that even people in like the medical field don't even totally acknowledge as a real disease. And I don't really know anything about it except that it's Lyme disease and not Lyme's disease. But basically what came with that is some excruciating pain that would kind of come in waves. And then also, he would be bedridden for potentially days at a time at different points until the effects of the disease kind of wore off. And you'd think that as someone who struggles with depression and has a hard time getting out of bed most days would be more understanding of something like that. But what ended up happening is, like, we would make plans, and a lot of the time I would, if he had to cancel for some reason, I didn't really give him the time of day. I was just upset and took it personally. And I know I shouldn't have at this point, but back then I took it a lot more personally. And I got to the point where I thought he was just making up this illness because he was trying to find a way to get out of these plans that we had made. And again, I know that that's a naive thought, because it's very selfish. It's very selfish to think that this person is making something up just for the sake of not doing something with me or getting out of it or something like that. But in all seriousness, he was honestly just had a disease that was pretty horrific. And at that point, it would have been, looking back at it, the appropriate thing to do would be empathetic and kind of understanding of, okay, well, you're having a shitty time. Your body's giving you a pretty difficult time. I should be more understanding of that and be a little bit more flexible with my schedule. But instead of that, what I did was increasingly more and more, I would distance myself from that friend until I really wasn't talking to them much at all. Because I just hit a point of, if they're going to keep canceling, what's the point of trying to make these plans? Even though we are good friends, and he's now, after coming to terms with the fact that I was being ridiculous and apologizing to him for it, we're pretty good friends now. But for a while, it was just me being an ass, and I'm perfectly fine admitting that. It's just for me, realizing that in the past I've done some very awful things, or some or anything that's been negative to other people, and kind of understanding and embracing it and figuring out what I would have done differently can be very helpful. So, like, for that particular experience, again, I just should have been a lot more flexible and understanding of his issues, and not get so caught in my head and assume that him canceling was just him trying to get out of stuff. It's an interesting change of mind, because whenever you're younger, especially like in your teens, like right around puberty, and I know puberty hits at 13 or something like that. I don't know the exact age. I'm not a scientist or a doctor or any of that shit, but I know that it affects people at different times for different durations. And it's something, it's really hard to kind of think about other people whenever you have so many of your own internal struggles going on. And having depression and having that kind of mental illness definitely makes it a lot harder, because there's a lot more going through your head. So instead of having the normal questions and thoughts that, like, someone going through puberty would have of, oh shit, my voice squeaked, and I'm sweating a little bit more, and I have acne, it's like, oh shit, my voice squeaked, I have acne, and also I want to kill myself. And that's a problem. Like, having those thoughts, those are clearly not healthy. And it's really hard to start being conscious of other people's thoughts and concerns and needs. And that's why the episode that I'd done before this, opening up, I really think that helps, because if you can start opening up and you can start telling people more about what's going inside of your own mind and hear how they respond to it, and if they have similar things going on with them that you can relate to, it really helps with the empathy and trying to communicate with people on a more comfortable basis. Like, I can talk to someone and sit there for an hour and talk about the fact that I'm doing a podcast or writing or something, but just sitting there and talking about yourself is not as fulfilling a conversation as asking them what's going on with them too, because it really is, it can be very, if you genuinely are interested in what's going on with these people that you're talking to, then asking questions and talking about yourself together in the same conversation can be very fulfilling for both parties, because they're sitting there and you know that they care and they know that you care. And that helps a lot with just communicating with people and getting closer to them. And that's something that I struggled with for a very, 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 very long time. So one thing that I have a bad tendency to do is when, especially with people, is when the going gets tough, you just kind of run the other direction. It's just the comfortable thing to do. If something is difficult, if you have a hard conversation to have with someone, it is significantly easier, in my mind, to just run. Don't look back. Flee the state if you need to, and just start somewhere else, right? So I live in Pennsylvania, and let's say I'm having an argument with someone, and all of a sudden I'm starting to get very anxious about it, and I'm starting to freak out, and I don't know how to deal with it because I don't know what the solution is to this argument, or where the compromise is, or where the common ground is, or any of that stuff. The thought would go through my head of, wouldn't it just be easier to move to Dallas or like Washington State and just start again? And then if I start again, then I'll meet new people and they won't know that I've had this stupid, ignorant past. But then you're sitting there and you're stuck in your head. It's like, well, if I move to this other state and I'm still me, I'm still gonna have these dumb interactions that I like can't seem to stop. And then I start to freak out because I'm like, if I stay here, I have a problem to deal with, and I don't know how to deal with it. But if I go somewhere else, I'm still the same person, and I'm still going to have these problems, and I'm still not going to know how to deal with it. And then honestly, for me, that's a lot of the time whenever the thoughts just keep going in a downward spiral, and I eventually, the thought of suicide eventually crosses my mind. Because there's just a point of, well, if I can't run away, because I can't figure it out. I can't figure it out here, so I want to run away, but I can't because I don't have the means or the mental fortitude to do so. So I can't run away. Then that option is done. But I'm stuck here, and I have to deal with it. Well, wouldn't it be easier to just do something? And then it's just constantly looking for an escape from this awkward encounter, an awkward situation. And because of that unwillingness to confront something that's uncomfortable, or an unwillingness to just move away and try it again, which I do not recommend. I have not done that, but I don't recommend just up and leaving, because I don't think that's going to be a productive way to fix something. That's just pushing off the problem. And that's a lot of the time what can drive to people having more negative thoughts for a longer period of time, is if they just keep pushing it off and ignoring those problems, then they'll still be there. Like if you're listening to this, then you know that there's no quick fix to depression. There's nothing. There's not this thing. There's not these magic pills. Even if you are on some sort of prescription, it's not a solve all. There are still things that you need to figure out how to deal with, and running away is not it. Because if you run away, the thing that you do lose is a support system. Now, even if you don't have the best relationships in the area that you're at now, like whether it be with your friends or family or whomever, there's still a support system because they're familiar to you. And so even if you're not necessarily happy or thrilled or anything talking to these people, then you're still getting that kind of communication and that personal experience that you want. It's not as good as opening up and really talking to them and caring about what they're doing, but it's better than running away and not talking to people, because that is setting yourself up for disaster. And so the reason that I wanted to bring this up is because just with the mix of the last podcast with opening up and the thought of running away, something that I've always had a really hard time with is getting close to people, whether it's my family or my friends or a coworker or whomever. I just have the hardest time being comfortable getting close to people. So like, while I was in high school and middle school and even college, I refused to admit that I had a best friend. And I'm still hesitant to do that now, because it's just admitting this comfort and kind of codependence on someone. And that's really hard, because whenever you're depressed and you have those thoughts of going through your head of, I'm the only one going through this, no one understands my struggles, it's really hard to rely on someone else or refer to them as a best friend or even a friend, because that's like admitting it's like it feels like the most uncomfortable thing in the world. It feels like you're just the most vulnerable person because you're admitting that you appreciate someone's company. And that's not a good way to think about it. And it definitely helps it helps to be in that vulnerable state, because it lets you sit there and understand people a little bit more, and helps them understand you a little bit more. And that's really, really good for mental health, from my experience. But I always had a hard time opening up, and I always had a hard time getting close to people. So the second a friendship would start to go past, like, well, I talk to this person occasionally, to, oh, they just invited me to their house for like a birthday party or something, I would freak out, and I would not be happy, and I would not want to go. And if I did go, then I would not be a pleasant person to be around. I will say I'm not good at parties at all. I don't really enjoy them that much, because it's just a lot of people in a close space, and I don't function very well with that. So that's already one strike against me. But going in expecting it to be the worst thing ever, or expecting myself to really not enjoy it, it definitely makes it a lot worse. So what I would do is I would get to this point where I would have a friend invite me to something, or, we'll get to that point of like taking it from friendship to best friendship, or acquaintance to even friendship, and I would just stop talking to them. Or I would make something up that really had no significance, just to create some distance. One ridiculous example that I have was my freshman year of college. Me and a friend of mine from high school, we came to the same college. And we were okay friends when we were at high school, but not super close. But what ended up happening is you come to a new campus, you don't know a lot of people. Some people might go to a college where they don't know anybody. I was pretty lucky, and I went and I knew a few people and was happy talking to them. But like week 1 or 2, we started to get pretty close. And then we went to the cafeteria, which was all you can eat. You just pay at the front counter, and then you go in and you get whatever you want. And he took a French fry from my plate after I had gotten it, and I freaked out. Like, I freaked the fuck out. I was so angry. It was ridiculous. I knew I was being ridiculous, but I thought that I was doing it based on principle. But that doesn't mean anything. But I thought that I was like, well, don't take food off my tray. And then it kept escalating to the point of, I still don't really talk to him that much anymore. And I know that it was because I was being very, very, very childish. And the overreaction was so significant that there was basically no redeeming from, like, nothing. Now, I actually have some friends that they're mutual friends of me and the person who stole my fry. But everybody thinks that it's ridiculous and pretty funny. But I still sit there like, that's the dumbest thing I think I've ever done in my life. And it was just an overreaction to something that didn't matter. He stole a French fry from me at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Who cares? That doesn't matter in the slightest. But that's something that I did, and it's something that I can look back on and kind of look at it and laugh a little bit because of how ridiculous I was. But at the same time, I know that something like that wouldn't happen again. So, like, me and my girlfriend, if we go out to eat and she takes something off my plate, I couldn't care less because it doesn't matter. But 5-6 years ago, I would have thrown the biggest fit, and it would have been so dumb, and this relationship would not work. It just wouldn't, because of how ridiculous I was being in that moment. So, now, I've always thought that the reason that friendship is more difficult for me was because I just have a few examples of stuff that would like happen that were hard for me in terms of friends. So like in kindergarten, I had a friend, and he actually had I was too young to really understand the whole thing, but basically I'm pretty sure at the age of like 5 or 6 or something, he had his heart replaced, but he was absolutely my best friend at that moment. But at around the age of 5 or 6, he also died. So we were really good friends. I remember going to his Thomas the Tank Engine birthday party. And I think that's the last memory that I have of him. And it was just because he died. So from an early age, I think this was kindergarten or first grade, I had a hard time with friendship because my best friend literally died. So I know that that's just an experience that I've had, but it definitely didn't set me up for wanting to get close to people in the future. The only other really close friends that I could think of that have had that kind of have left my life were in 3rd grade, I would play games with this girl and also one of my good friends whenever I was younger. And we would play them every day. We played them for like every day at school, after school sometimes. And then she was there for 1 year and then immediately moved to, I think, Virginia Beach or something. But it was just, those were two examples that really impacted me as a kid, because that was like, okay, well, every time I friend someone and get close to them, they just kind of vanish. So for me, it's always been hard to justify having that close connection with people. Now I know, now that I'm 22 and I'm way past that shit happens, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, and you kind of just need to, even if it's really unpleasant, like your friend in kindergarten or first grade dying, you need to roll with the punches. And although it can feel like the world is going against you and rooting for you to fail, that's just not the case. And so what I've learned through all of the dumb encounters that I've had, and there are so many more. I've only given a few examples, and also just and also the fact that I have always had a hard time maintaining friendships and all that, with trying to distance myself or wanting to just run away from the whole thing. What I've started to come to terms with now is that, I mean, nobody's, and this is so cliche, but nobody's perfect. And there are going to be people, one, that you just don't mesh with, and you don't have to be their friends. You don't have to like everybody, and not everybody has to like you. And that's something that everybody still struggles with today, because everybody wants to be liked. But there are just some personality types that really don't mesh well together. But the other thing is, really bad things can happen, and you can react to them in pretty poor ways. And even stuff that doesn't matter, like a French fry, you can still react to them in really poor ways. And there's probably some reason for it. It's not because you have these weird outbursts that make you feel that you could compare with a temper tantrum from like the 5-year-old. There's probably something else there, and there's not a problem with having these conflicted emotions or doing these things that you struggle with, like, saying fuck you to someone that was just saying hello. But what really matters is kind of accepting the fact that, yeah, that was not a great way to respond. It's like, there are better ways to do it, and just going from there. It's all baby steps. Like, it's all baby steps. It's not you wake up one day and you're this perfect embodiment of social acceptance. It's not like you're going to walk out of your house one day and just be like, this is who I am now, and I'm perfect, and I can talk to anybody I want and all that, because it's still going to be a really awkward encounter, and potentially an awkward experience. But what matters is just kind of starting to figure out, okay, well, what I did at this point was a little bit awkward, and it affected the relationship in this way. This is how I should have reacted, or different ways that I could have reacted, and I can't let this thing that happened to me 10 years ago affect me, but instead I just need to make sure that the new relationships that I'm forming and the relationships that I'm currently working on, that I can avoid those kinds of things. It's all moving forward. There's always going to be more people that you can become friends with. So if you've ruined some in the past, and everybody has, whether it's going from high school and losing touch with people from like middle school, or going to college and losing touch with people from high school, or all that stuff, there's always more people that you can befriend and kind of get to know and all that stuff. So if there are a few that you screwed up when you're in kindergarten, that really doesn't matter, even though it feels like the end of the world sometimes, especially when those random spontaneous thoughts jump into your head. All you need to do is take baby steps, look at it with some unbiased vision, realize that there may have been times, or there may be times, where you don't react to something in the most appropriate way, and that the best solution isn't to run away or to give up on that friend, but instead accepting and kind of understanding that what you did was wrong, or not the right thing, or you could have done something, even if it's not necessarily wrong, you could have done it better and in a more understanding way, then you'll start to build these relationships with the most unlikely people. And it's really, really good to start figuring out how to build those relationships and really trying to build that support system for yourself. Whatever reason that you have a hard time making friends, maybe it's just that you have a hard time communicating with people or like finding common ground. Just start looking for people with that common ground and you'll start to fit in. But it's hard. It's really hard to start looking for people that have that common ground. Let's say you're really into comic books, right? But you don't love the Marvel movies because they kind of... So I don't like comic books that much. I'm not a big reader of comic books, but I like the Marvel movies on occasion. But like, say you're really, really into comic books, and when you try to talk to someone about it, the extent of their knowledge is the movies, and they don't know anything past it. But you're not that big into the movies because you like the comic books, and reading is better than the movie itself. Just look for people that like those comics. Find a GameStop, or not a GameStop, a game store. Find a comic shop or some local establishment, and just drop in there, and you'll be able to find people. The same goes for any hobby. I like to write. There are writing support groups. I know people that like to make music and find music, like a music writers guild or workshop or something. And then, improvisational comedy. You can drop in on one of those and just immediately you're accepted because it's just a bunch of wacky people doing weird shit. And it's fun. And all it takes is kind of taking that one little step outside of your comfort zone and letting yourself be in that awkward situation and be vulnerable. And then from there, you can start to create these relationships as long as you are able to understand where you went wrong. And as long as you're able to kind of work from that and grow from it. So, I think that's all I have on friendship today. So if you have any comments or questions or anything, feel free to comment. I'd love to hear some feedback. And also, just as a quick thing at the end, so my name's Scott, obviously, but Acceptable Madness is something that I want it to be more than just a podcast and a blog. I just want it to grow a little bit. I think it can be I think that the brand can be helpful, and I like to look at depression. I know that it can be a really dark topic, and I'm trying to look at it with more encouraging goggles, like trying to look at it so it's not just this dark, depressing, suicidal thing all the time, but that sometimes it's just hard, but not the end of the world. And I'm not seeing too many outlets like that out there. I see a lot that look at depression as if it's all suicide all the time, and that's the only thing that you can talk about, and just I don't think that's the most productive way to go about it. Basically, what I'd like to do is help more people. So I'll just a little shameless plug at the end. I have a Facebook. All of this is under the name Acceptable Madness. But I have a Facebook that I'll post on. That'll kind of be the collection of everything that I do. It'll have I have a blog that I post on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that'll all go to Facebook. I have an Instagram. I just started it, so there's no posts yet, but it'll be coming. I have a calendar for when I'm going to post and what I'm going to post. And then also, I would like to do some more readings of my stuff for like YouTube, just because I think that video editing is a lot of fun, and I think that might be an easier way for some people to find my writing and kind of relate to it. So just keep an eye out. If you like what I do, look for me on these different platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, my blog, YouTube, and feel free to comment or like or whatever you do on all those platforms. And let me know what you think. Like I said, I want to be able to help people, and I think that this is a good way to do so. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.